Recently, the Royal British Columbia Museum announced that they would be undergoing a series of decolonization efforts, and some people lost their minds. We have people writing opinion pieces to the local paper, we have people writing nasty messages on Reddit and on Facebook, and everyone is losing their mind. So let's unpack all this, shall we? For starters, if you don't know who I am, hi! I run this silly little YouTube channel, and once upon a time I was actually an intern at the Royal British Columbia Museum. And currently, I am actually an assistant curator at a different small museum in Victoria. Due to the nature of my work, I am actually quite familiar with the colonial history of Victoria and British Columbia. So familiar, in fact, that I have personally handled Peter O'Reilly's undergarments. We aren't here to talk about me, though. We're here to talk about the Royal British Columbia Museum, which I will be calling the RBCM from here on out. The museum was founded in 1886 in response to a petition signed by 30 prominent citizens, asking for a museum to host a collection of Indigenous cultural items and natural history items. Over the years, the museum would move several times before it finally found its current location at the corner of Government and Belfield Street, and as the museum grew, so did its collection. The galleries of the museum that you can go and visit today are separated across 2 floors. The first floor is the main lobby, the second floor is dedicated to natural history, and the third floor is where you find all of human history. The human history floor is divided into further sub-galleries, so you can go and see an entire gallery about the history of the First Nations people of British Columbia, and you can also go and learn about the last 150 years of colonial British Columbia. Now, the RBCM has had a rough couple of years when it comes to controversies. The head of Indigenous Collections and Repatriation actually stepped down in 2020 as a result of a toxic and racist work environment, and this was actually taken very seriously, and an investigation into the RBCM was actually conducted. As a result of this investigation, some people were shuffled around, but most notably, the museum CEO, Jack Lohman, stepped down. As part of these investigations, the institution has vowed to do better and has announced these decolonization efforts, which is why I am here today talking to you. The bulk of these decolonization efforts will be taking place on the 3rd floor, which is the human history side of things, with emphasis on overhauling the First Nations galleries, but most prominently the colonial galleries. The announcement to overhaul these galleries was reacted to by the public with, well, for lack of a better term, outrage. As I mentioned earlier, there have been all sorts of articles and opinion pieces written in response to this announcement due to the fact that, people are very fond of these galleries, due in no small part to their old-timey charm. As a local, I grew up going to this museum. As a child, it was the destination to numerous field trips, and as an adult, the RBCM was the foundation of a lot of case studies for when I was writing assignments and papers to get my degrees in cultural resource management. When they first announced that they were going to be overhauling these galleries, there was very little information being offered to the general public, and I'll admit I was also a little bit disappointed to see them go. With this being said, I don't understand the wave of negative reactions here. The stories and histories contained in the Old Town, HMS Discovery, and Industry galleries will most likely be included in the new exhibit spaces. And I believe that the exhibit fabrication team at the museum will do a great job and make the new exhibit space immersive and engaging and fun. It's sad to see something that we are nostalgic for disappear, but this is going to allow the museum to tell stories that they couldn't before. There are a lot of people saying that this is the destruction of history, or history is being erased. But like I've said in many of my other videos, the people who say these kinds of things don't usually know what the process of decolonization looks like, nor do they actually really know what it means. The history that you love is still going to be there. I have no doubt that there will still be discussions of industry and gold rush and wealthy 19th century Victoria. What will be new will be the added perspectives. One thing that has been lacking in these exhibits for a very long time are the experiences of non-white people. Even women seem to have been forgotten in a lot of these galleries. Currently, it paints a picture of a white man's history, when in reality, there were so many other people involved in the foundation of British Columbia. We can still talk about the white guys. But let's talk about all of the other people who were there too. I just learned they actually did a media release with the acting CEO, Dan Musica, and it sounds like they're actually going to be doing a consultation process where you can essentially pitch any new ideas that you might have for the new exhibits. So with that in mind, here's a few ideas that I have as a historian, Victoria local, and museum person that I would like to see in these new exhibits. My number one thing that I want to see in these new exhibits is a little bit more effort put into the whole residential school section of Canadian history. You want to talk about erasing history? There wasn't even a mention of residential schools in the RBCM until like a year ago. Just a few out of context artifacts thrown in a couple cases here and there. Years ago, they had a key on display that was made of like bent forks and knives, and it was accompanied by a text panel, and all that the text panel said was "key for thieving," because it was being used by starving children at residential schools to try and get something to eat. Another thing that I am hoping that we can see in these newly revamped exhibits is more discussion of the Chinese and Black communities in Victoria in the 19th and early 20th centuries. There were whole communities of these different cultures living in Victoria in the 19th century, but all we really ever get to hear about is the wealthy aristocrats. I also want to hear more about the women, not just the wealthy women, but the everyday woman too. I don't know about you, but personally, I like to learn about everyday people. I myself am an everyday person. It just annoys me because the people who say this phrase, erasing history, probably haven't been to the smaller museums in Victoria that are struggling to get by. If you really want to dig into local history and prevent it from being erased, all I ask as a museum professional is that you show up and you ask a few questions. So grab a friend and go to the Ross Bay Villa or Point Ellis House or Emily Carr House or some other small museum in Victoria and sit down and engage with the history. Read the text panels, ask questions. All of us as museum people, it's what we love to talk about and we want to be able to share this history with you, but people aren't showing up to these smaller museums. So to conclude, I guess the message that I'm trying to get across here is this. While I am a little sad to see these exhibits at the RBCM go, I am very much looking forward to whatever they put together, and I hope that they are able to offer a more well-rounded and educational museum experience. And while the third floor galleries are closed, and if you really want to scratch that museum itch, there are plenty of small museums and art galleries around Victoria that I'm sure would love to have your patronage.